You do not get to call a man dead just because saving him is inconvenient. Commander Sorelia Voss heard the words in her own head before she had the courage to say them out loud. The bridge of the Aurelian flagship was silent except for the soft pulse of blue instruments and the low breathing of officers who wanted this ceremony finished. Beyond the forward glass, the Helios Rift hung in space like a bruise, a black tear almost 6,000 miles wide where scanners failed, clocks slipped, and rescue drones went in straight lines and came back as dead metal. 19 days earlier, Ryan Walker had vanished inside it. Human male, 38 years old, signal engineer, Terran Deep Survey attachment. White American from the coast of Maine. Quiet. Practical. Always smelled faintly of coffee and machine oil. According to every medical projection on Sorelia's display, his oxygen should have run out on the 3rd day. His suit battery should have frozen by the 5th. By the 9th, even the Terran observers had stopped asking for updates. And now, because the Council wanted the file closed before the next diplomatic cycle, Sorelia stood in front of her crew with Ryan's service record glowing above the command table like a receipt nobody wanted to read. Human technician Ryan Walker, she began, her silver blue skin pale under the bridge lights, assigned to auxiliary relay maintenance during the Beacon 773 survey operation, is hereby declared lost in unrecoverable space. Lieutenant Kale, her youngest navigation officer, lowered his eyes. The Aurelian science caste did not lower their eyes for humans. That was new. Sorelia noticed it and hated that she noticed it. On the screen, Ryan's last image remained frozen from his helmet camera. Tired gray eyes. A cracked smile. One gloved hand lifted as if he were telling everyone not to make a fuss. She remembered his last transmission too clearly. Commander, tell my sister I fixed the leak on Deck 12. Not goodbye. Not help me. Not please. Just a maintenance note, spoken by a man being swallowed by a place no ship dared enter. Sorelia tightened her fingers around the ceremonial marker. His loss will be entered as an acceptable survey casualty under Council salvage law. The words tasted wrong. Behind her, Council observer Malrek gave a small satisfied nod, the kind officials gave when numbers behaved. Proceed, he said. The human was warned about primitive equipment in proximity to ancient systems. His death is unfortunate, but not strategically relevant. Something in Sorelia's chest went cold. She turned slightly. He had a name. Malrek blinked, annoyed by the delay. So do asteroids, Commander. Finish the declaration. A few officers shifted at their stations. Nobody spoke. The rift waited outside the glass, enormous and empty. Sorelia looked back at the record. Ryan Walker. Emergency contact, younger sister, Portland, Maine. Personal note, prefers paper manuals. Crew remark, repairs old systems by ear. She lifted the marker again, but her hand would not move. Then every light on the bridge went out. Not dimmed. Not switched. Cut. The flagship dropped into darkness so complete that for one breath, even the stars disappeared. Alarms tried to start and failed halfway, choking into static. A circle of amber light opened on the main display, thin as a wedding ring, old as buried fire. The ancient beacon, silent for 40,000 years, had just awakened inside the Helios Rift. The bridge crew froze. Malrek whispered, "Impossible." The speakers cracked once, twice, then filled with a rough human cough and a voice so dry it sounded like it had crawled through dust. "This is Walker." Nobody moved. The voice came again, weak, irritated, unmistakably alive. "Stop saying I'm dead. It's distracting." Sorelia stared at the black rift as the amber ring widened across the glass. Somewhere inside the oldest dead zone in known space, a lost human was still breathing. And something ancient had answered only him. 19 days before the beacon spoke, Ryan Walker was not standing on the bridge. He was 2 decks below it, shoulder deep inside a relay cabinet that every Aurelian engineer had already marked for disposal. The cabinet was older than most of the crew, held together by scratched titanium bolts, hand-labeled wires, and one strip of gray duct tape Ryan had brought from Earth because, as he put it, good tape is cheaper than a funeral. Around him, the maintenance base smelled like hot dust, recycled air, and the bitter coffee he kept reheating until it tasted like engine cleaner. He did not have officer quarters. He had a narrow bunk beside crates of spare valves, emergency filters, and outdated human radio gear nobody else wanted to touch. To the Aurelians, it was storage. To Ryan, it was quiet. He liked quiet. Quiet told the truth before people did. Commander Sorelia Voss entered the bay that morning with 2 science officers behind her, her silver-blue skin catching the white overhead light like polished glass. She looked around at the cluttered tools, the paper manuals, the grease pencil markings on the bulkhead, and tried not to show disappointment. Ryan noticed anyway. He always noticed. "Mr. Walker," she said, formal and distant. "The survey team reports that your analog equipment is interfering with clean scans." Ryan did not look up right away. He tightened one connector by hand, gave it a small tug, then wiped his fingers on a rag. "It is not interfering," he said. "It is listening to things your clean scans filter out." One of the science officers made a soft clicking sound that the translator politely ignored. Sorelia did not. "Our systems are calibrated for ancient signal structures," she said. "Your device is a camping radio with extra wires." Ryan glanced at the battered receiver sitting on the crate beside him. "That camping radio found your coolant leak on deck 12. The younger officer laughed under his breath. "A leak any trained technician would have found." Ryan looked at him calmly. "Then you are welcome." The officer stopped smiling. Sorelia should have corrected the insult sooner. She knew that later. At the time, she only saw a human contractor who moved slowly, spoke plainly, and treated advanced alien hardware like a stubborn pickup truck in a winter driveway. Useful, yes. Brave in the small ways humans often were. But not important. Not to the mission. Not to the beacon. Not to history. Ryan went back to work. He had learned a long time ago that people who underestimated you usually gave you more room to think. Back in Maine, his father had fixed lobster boats for men with newer trucks and louder opinions. He used to tell Ryan, "When rich people laugh at old tools, keep the old tools." So Ryan kept them. The copper antenna, the paper schematics, the hand-crank backup charger, the old emergency channel recorder set to a frequency no Aurelian database bothered to index. Before Sorelia left, she paused at the hatch. "Do you ever get tired of being treated like support staff?" Ryan shut the relay cabinet and picked up his coffee. "Commander, I am support staff." "That is not what I asked." For the first time, he looked directly at her. His gray eyes were tired but steady. "I get tired of people confusing simple with stupid." Sorelia had no answer for that. She simply nodded and returned to the upper decks, where clean glass consoles hummed and ancient mysteries waited for royal commands. Ryan stayed below, listening to static in a room nobody respected, hearing a pattern the rest of them had already thrown away. By the time the flagship reached Beacon 773, half the crew had gathered near observation glass just to see whether the old stories were true. The object hung above a cracked gray planet, wider than downtown Boston, shaped like 3 black rings folded through one another in ways that made the eye want to look away. No engine trail, no heat bloom, no visible damage. It simply waited there, older than every flag in the Council archive, older than the Aurelian dynasty, older than the languages being used to argue over it. Commander Sorelia stood at the center of the bridge with her hands clasped behind her back, trying to look as calm as her rank required. Council observer Malrek watched from the upper platform, his robes stiff with ceremonial authority. "Begin royal access sequence," he said. The science officers activated the Aurelian command hymn, a layered mathematical signal carried through plasma light and neural pulse. The bridge filled with a clean silver tone that made several younger officers straighten with pride. It was the sound of empire, lineage, and inheritance. Beacon 773 did nothing. No lights. No movement. Not even a change in surface temperature. Lieutenant Kale swallowed. No response. Malrek's face tightened. "Try the dynasty cipher." Sorelia nodded, and the ship broadcast the old sovereign key, a code reserved for sealed tomb gates and pre-council war vaults. Again, nothing happened. For 2 hours, they tried everything the galaxy called advanced. Quantum lattice speech. Genetic authority markers. Harmonic gravity taps. A light pattern prayer from a species that claimed its ancestors had once spoken to the dead. The beacon ignored all of it with the patience of stone. Down in the maintenance bay, Ryan listened through a patched audio line he was not supposed to have connected. The official feed sounded empty to everyone else, but beneath the static he heard something soft and regular, like a lighthouse bell buried under storm noise. 3 beats. A pause. 3 beats again. He leaned closer, one hand over his headphones. "Well, that is not dead," he muttered. The nearest Aurelian technician looked over. "You are speaking to a box of obsolete parts." Not the first time. Ryan adjusted the receiver and marked the rhythm on a paper pad. 3 short pulses. Long pause. Frequency drift like an old emergency beacon trying to save power. It reminded him of search and rescue drills off the Maine coast, when fog swallowed boats, and everybody got quiet, because quiet meant somebody might still be out there. He keyed the intercom. "Commander Voss, this is Walker. Request permission to send a low-band voice sweep through the auxiliary array." Ceralia's voice returned after a pause. "Explain. There is a pattern under the static. Not command code. More like a call and response. I want to talk to it." On the bridge, one of the senior scientists actually laughed. "He wants to speak to it." Malrek turned his head slowly, offended by the idea itself. That relic refused crown bloodlines and council keys. It will not answer a human maintenance worker breathing into a microphone. Ryan heard every word. He sat back, looked at the old receiver, and rubbed his thumb over a scratch in the metal casing. For a second, he almost let it go. Almost. Then he pressed the channel again. "With respect, observer, a locked door does not care how important you are if you are using the wrong key." The bridge went still. Ceralia looked at the dead beacon, then at the small human signal request blinking on her display. Something in her wanted to say yes. Something trained into her said no. Before she could choose, Malrek stepped forward. "Denied. Prepare the core spike." Ryan closed his eyes for 1 beat, long enough to hide the frustration. Then he whispered to the static, too low for anyone but his recorder to catch. "Hang on. I hear you." Far outside the ship, on the surface of Beacon 773, one black ring gave the faintest flicker of amber light. So small, every Aurelian scanner dismissed it as noise. The core spike did not look dangerous at first. It looked clean, almost elegant, a white column of concentrated power extending from the flagship toward the silent rings of Beacon 773 like a ruler tapping the surface of a desk. On the bridge, every Aurelian officer watched the projection with the stiff confidence of people following a procedure written by someone far above them. Council observer Malrek stood with his chin lifted, already preparing the language for his report. Commander Ceralia kept her eyes on the energy curve, but her mind kept drifting back to Ryan's voice from the maintenance bay. "A locked door does not care how important you are if you are using the wrong key. Power at 20%, Lieutenant Kale said. Beacon surface remains stable. Increase to 40, Malrek ordered. Ceralia glanced at him. Observer, the human technician reported an active pattern under the static. If the structure is responding at all, forced entry may trigger a defensive system. Malrek gave her the tired look of a politician hearing a mechanic question a priest. Commander, your sympathy for lower species is becoming expensive. Proceed. Down below, Ryan felt the ship change before the alarms did. The deck under his boots gave a tiny sideways shiver, the kind most people would miss. He set his coffee down. The liquid trembled in a narrow ring. That is not good, he said. The Aurelian technician beside him looked up from her console. The core spike is within authorized limits. Ryan was already moving. He grabbed the old receiver, the hand-crank charger, and his paper pad. Authorized by people who are not listening. He keyed the ship-wide channel. Commander Voss, abort the spike. The beacon is not accepting power. It is pushing it back. On the bridge, Ceralia snapped her attention to the auxiliary feed. Confirm that. I cannot confirm it with your scanners, Ryan said, walking fast through the relay corridor. I can hear it. The return pulse is out of phase. If you keep pressing, something is going to fold. A senior scientist scoffed. Fold is not a technical term. Ryan reached the outer relay bay, the section closest to the auxiliary array. Neither is screaming, but people understand it. Ceralia turned toward Malrek. Cut power. Malrek's expression hardened. Denied. This is my ship. This is a council operation. The argument lasted 3 seconds too long. At 47%, the beacon answered. Not with light. Not with sound. With motion where motion had no business being. Space between the ship and the ancient rings bent inward like a sheet pulled through a drain. Every console on the bridge flashed white. The flagship lurched, not hard enough to throw bodies across the room. but deep enough to make every stomach drop, as if the floor had vanished for half a second. In the outer relay bay, Ryan slammed one palm against the wall and caught the edge of a work rail with the other. The emergency doors began sealing one by one, heavy plates dropping through the corridor behind him. He looked through the small viewport and saw the stars smear sideways. "Commander," he said, breathing harder now, but still level. "Relay Bay 3 is losing lock. I am on the wrong side of the bulkhead." Sorelia stepped toward the command table. "Open a rescue tether. Automatic rescue priority is restricted to Aurelian command crew," Kale said, his voice breaking with shame. "Override it." "I am trying." The ship groaned like an old house in a storm. Ryan looked around the bay, understood the math faster than anyone wanted him to, and clipped the old receiver to his suit harness. "Do not send a shuttle blind," he said. "Mark my last vector." Sorelia's voice came through, lower now. "Ryan, we are not leaving you." For the first time since she had known him, he sounded almost amused. "Commander, I appreciate the promotion to we." The viewport filled with amber darkness. His signal began to tear at the edges. "Tell my sister I fixed the leak on deck 12. Sorelia reached for the manual override with both hands. The relay bay vanished from every screen. The core spike collapsed. Beacon 773 went silent again. And where Ryan Walker had been, there was only the Helios Rift, black and patient, holding its breath. For the first hour after Ryan disappeared, nobody used the word dead. They used cleaner words, the kind that fit inside reports without leaving fingerprints. Signal discontinuity. Recovery uncertainty. Environmental loss. Probability collapse. Commander Sorelia Voss stood over the command table while the Helios Rift rolled in slow black waves beyond the glass, and she listened to officers explain why a living man could not be treated like a living man if the math had already decided otherwise. "We can hold position for another 6 hours," Lieutenant Kale said, his voice careful. "The auxiliary drones might pick up suit telemetry if the distortion weakens." Council observer Malrek did not even look at him. "Absolutely not. This vessel has already suffered mission delay due to human error and emotional hesitation." Sorelia's eyes moved to him. "Human error?" He entered an unstable relay section during a classified operation. "He was trying to warn us. He was a contractor outside his technical authority." The bridge went quiet. That was the moment Sorelia understood how history got buried. Not with lies at first. With wording. With little phrases polished smooth enough that nobody had to feel the weight of what they meant. She ordered a full sensor sweep anyway. Then another. Then a third. The ship remained at the edge of the rift until the science deck began filing fuel complaints and Council Command sent a priority message sealed in red. Ryan Walker was to be classified as an acceptable survey loss. The phrase appeared on Sorelia's display in perfect formal script. Acceptable. She stared at it until the letters stopped looking like language. That night, she went down to the maintenance bay alone. Nobody had cleaned it yet. Ryan's mug still sat beside the receiver, cold coffee dried in a brown ring at the bottom. His paper pad was open on a crate, covered in pencil marks, pulse counts, little arrows, and one note written in plain block letters. "It is answering, just not them." Sorelia touched the edge of the paper with 2 fingers. Aurelian stored memory in crystal archives, elegant and permanent. Humans wrote warnings on cheap paper with dull pencils, and somehow made it feel more honest. She found the leak report from Deck 12 taped to the wall. Fixed manually. Recommend replacing council-grade valve before somebody learns the hard way. No signature. No request for credit. Just work done because work needed doing. Over the next several days, the crew changed in small ways that no report would catch. The young cadet Ryan had once helped during a pressure malfunction, started checking the auxiliary channel before each shift. Kale stopped laughing when someone called human tools primitive. A kitchen worker left a fresh cup of coffee beside the silent receiver every morning. Even though Ryan was gone and the machine could not drink it. Sorelia noticed all of it, and the noticing hurt. On the 9th day, Malrek visited her ready room. "You are allowing sentiment to spread through the crew," he said. "A human died. Humans die easily. It is one of their defining features." Sorelia looked up from Ryan's file. There was a photograph attached, taken before launch. Ryan in a faded flannel shirt, standing beside a woman with the same gray eyes, both of them smiling in front of a rocky Maine shoreline under a cloudy sky. His sister, probably. The person she would have to contact when this became final. They also come back for each other, Cerellia said. Malrek's mouth tightened. A charming tribal instinct. Not a command principle. She closed the file. Maybe that is why they notice things we miss. For once, Malrek had no quick answer. He left with his robes whispering behind him, and Cerellia remained alone under the pale ceiling lights, listening to the empty channel. By the 19th day, there was no official hope left. The ceremony was scheduled. The declaration was written. The word acceptable waited in the document like a stain. Cerellia stood before the observation glass and looked into the rift one last time before signing. She did not pray. Aurelians did not pray for contractors. But she found herself speaking softly anyway. Ryan Walker, if you are still out there, make a liar out of all of us. The receiver on the table gave one tiny click. The click was so small Cerellia almost thought she had imagined it. Then it came again, 3 short taps through the old receiver on the command table, followed by a breath of static that made every officer on the bridge turn toward the maintenance channel. Lieutenant Kale stepped closer to his console. Commander, that device is not connected to our primary systems. Cerellia did not take her eyes off the receiver. It is connected to his. Council observer Malrek moved down from the upper platform, suddenly less bored. Shut it off. No one moved. The receiver clicked again. 3 taps. A pause. 3 taps. The same rhythm Ryan had scribbled across his paper pad 19 days earlier. Cerellia lifted one hand slowly. Route auxiliary audio to the bridge speakers. Kale hesitated only long enough to look afraid, then obeyed. The first sound that filled the room was not a voice. It was breathing. Thin, uneven, human breathing, dragged through a wall of distance and broken signal. Then came a low scrape, like gloved fingers against metal. A man coughed once and forced the words out with the stubbornness of someone refusing to give the universe the satisfaction of silence. Ryan Walker. Terran Deep Survey. Manual Rescue Channel. Still breathing. Cerellia's throat tightened. Around her, Aurelian officers stood frozen in the blue dark of the bridge. Outside the observation glass, Beacon 773 remained black, but one ring along its surface began to glow amber, dim at first, then steady. Kale whispered, "It is responding." Malrek snapped, "That is not possible." The voice came again, weaker but clearer. Ryan Walker. Terran Deep Survey. Manual Rescue Channel. Still breathing. Each time Ryan said his name, the beacon brightened. Not like a machine powering up for command. More like a house lighting windows for someone expected home. The forward display filled with symbols no modern translator recognized. They did not arrange themselves around Aurelian grammar or council access codes. They moved in time with the rhythm of Ryan's breathing. Cerellia stepped closer to the glass. "Ryan, this is Commander Voss. We hear you." Static swallowed the channel for several long seconds. Then Ryan answered, tired and dry as ever. "Good. I was starting to think your fancy ship had bad speakers." A sound moved through the bridge that was almost a laugh and almost something close to pain. Cerellia closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them. "Are you injured?" "I am cold. Hungry. Pretty sure I have been sleeping in a hallway older than religion. But I am here." The amber ring widened. A second ring woke behind it. Star maps began unfolding across the main display. Not the Council's map. Not the Aurelian military grid. But something deeper, older, with entire regions missing from every archive Cerellia had ever studied. Kale stared at the data. "Commander, the beacon is not just locating him. It is verifying him." Malrek's voice sharpened. "Verifying what?" The answer came from the receiver before anyone else could speak. A calm mechanical tone, ancient and cracked by time, carried through Ryan's open channel. Human voice print confirmed. "Emergency return protocol active." Nobody breathed. Cerellia looked at Malrek, and for the first time since the mission began, the council observer looked scared. Ryan's voice returned, quieter now, but still carrying that impossible human steadiness. "Commander, I think this thing knows my name." Beyond the glass, the dead zone began to glow. Inside the rift, Ryan Walker had stopped pretending he understood where he was. The place looked like a hallway, but it could not have been a hallway, not in any normal sense. It stretched farther than his helmet light could reach, built from dark metal that did not reflect light so much as remember it. His suit clock had failed on day 2. His food had run out sometime after that. He had been rationing water in mouthfuls small enough to make him angry, because anger was easier than fear and a lot more useful. Every few hours, or what felt like hours, he forced himself to stand, check the receiver, and read the same words into the dark. Ryan Walker. Terran Deep Survey. Manual Rescue Channel. Still breathing. At first, he had done it for the ship. Then he had done it for Soralia, because somebody out there deserved proof that Council math was wrong. By day 19, he was doing it for his sister back in Portland, because she had once told him that walkers were too stubborn to haunt people quietly. The first time the corridor answered, Ryan nearly dropped the microphone. A thin amber line ran along the wall, following the sound of his voice like a porch light turning on after midnight. He stared at it for a long second, breathing hard inside his helmet. "Well," he whispered, "that is new." The line spread into symbols carved beneath layers of dust. Ryan leaned closer. They were not English. Not exactly. But some of the shapes made his stomach tighten. A bent curve like an R. A crossbar like an old T. Marks that looked less like alien script and more like human letters dragged through thousands of years of bad weather. He followed the light until the hallway opened into a chamber the size of a high school gym. If a high school gym had been built by people who expected stars to move around it. In the center sat a console with no holograms, no neural ports, no elegant Aurelian glass. Just a recessed plate, a narrow speaker grill, and a row of pressure keys shaped for fingers. Human fingers. Ryan stood there, too tired to be dramatic, too scared to laugh. "You have got to be kidding me." The console warmed under his glove. A sound came through the walls, soft and patient, like an old emergency broadcast waking after a storm. Voice continuity recognized. Ryan swallowed. Recognized from where? No answer. The amber symbols shifted, and the chamber projected a star map into the air, not with light, but with tiny points of heat against his faceplate. Earth appeared near the edge, small and blue. Then other points lit up, far beyond charted routes, spread through dead zones the Council had labeled empty. Ryan reached toward one, and an image opened. Not a fleet, not a throne, a rescue station, habitation pods, medical bays, signal towers, places built for survivors. Places built by hands that looked painfully familiar. His chest tightened so sharply he had to sit on the floor. For the first time since the relay bay vanished, he felt something worse than fear. He felt homesick for people he had never met. "Commander," he said into the receiver, voice rough. "I found something in here." Static answered. Then Soralia's voice broke through. "Ryan, describe it." He looked at the finger-shaped keys, the old map, the worn metal where countless palms had rested before his. "I do not think this beacon was built to keep people out," he said. "I think it was built because somebody knew what it felt like to be left behind." On the bridge, no one spoke. Inside the chamber, the console pulsed once beneath his hand, and a new message formed across his visor in plain Terran letters, imperfect, but readable. "Welcome back." On the bridge, Soralia watched the word form on Ryan's helmet feed, and for the first time in her life, the oldest lesson of her people felt small. The Council had taught every civilized species the same story. Before their law, there was chaos. Before their maps, there was darkness. Before their authority, there was nothing worth remembering. But now the dead zone was drawing a different map across her command display, and every glowing point carried the same design language Ryan had found inside the chamber. Not conquest. Not borders. Rescue routes. Shelter stations. Emergency return corridors. Places built for people who had been lost. Lieutenant Kale stood beside her, his face pale. "Commander, these coordinates run through sectors the Council classified as naturally unstable." "They are not naturally unstable," Soralia said quietly. "They were hidden." Council observer Malrek moved fast then, all his boredom gone. "Seal that channel." Nobody obeyed at first. He turned sharply. "That is a direct Council order." Soralia did not look away from Ryan's feet. Inside the rift, he was moving one gloved hand over the ancient console, reading the rough Terran letters like a man touching an old family photograph he had never known existed. "Commander," Ryan said through static, "I am seeing station logs. Some of them are broken, but the dates are wrong. Really wrong. This place was operating before the Council says humans had agriculture." Malrek's voice cut across the bridge. "The human is confused from exposure." Ryan gave a tired laugh. "Buddy, I have been cold, thirsty, and stuck in a haunted hallway for almost 3 weeks. I know confused. This is not confused. Sorelia finally turned to Malrek. What is this? His eyes flicked toward the crew, then back to her. Classified archival contamination. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you are cleared to receive. The main display suddenly flashed red as a secure council packet forced itself into the ship's command layer. Kale read it and went still. Commander, they are ordering immediate sterilization of Beacon 773. Full thermal purge. No recovery attempt. The words landed harder than any alarm. Sorelia felt every officer on the bridge look at her. Thermal purge meant erasing the beacon, the chamber, the map, and Ryan with it. Not by accident this time. By decision. Ryan heard the silence. Sorelia, he said, dropping the rank for the first time. What did they just tell you to do? Malrek snapped. You will not answer him. Sorelia's fingers rested on the command table. She could feel the old life she had been trained for standing behind her like a locked door. Promotions, honors, obedience, clean reports, safe lies. Ahead of her was one human in a torn suit, still breathing because he had refused to stop calling home. They told me to bury the truth, she said. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came back softer. That sounds about right. Malrek stepped toward the override panel. Commander Voss, if you refuse, you will be removed from command. Sorelia looked at Kale. The young officer was shaking, but his hands were already over the security controls. Bridge lockout, she ordered. Kale swallowed. Against council access? Against everyone. The doors sealed with a heavy calm click. Malrek froze. Sorelia opened Ryan's audio across the entire ship, every deck, every station, every crew quarter. All hands, this is Commander Voss. For 19 days, we called Ryan Walker an acceptable loss. The council now asks us to make that lie permanent. She looked out at the amber glow spreading through the rift. We are done mistaking obedience for honor. Then she leaned toward the receiver. Ryan, keep talking. We are coming for you. Inside the ancient chamber, Ryan closed his eyes for half a second, touched the console, and spoke into the dark with the last strength he had. Ryan Walker. Terran Deep Survey. Manual Rescue Channel. Still breathing. The beacon answered like a sunrise. The beacon did not open like a door. It opened like a promise being kept late. Amber light spread across the Helios Rift in long, quiet lines, stitching the black wound together until the dead zone became a road. On the bridge, every Aurelian screen filled with the same signal. One human voice, one old rescue phrase, one stubborn heartbeat the council had already filed away as finished. Sorelia stood at the command table with her hands steady. Even as Malrek shouted orders no one followed. Commander, you are committing treason against the council. She did not look at him. No, she said. I am correcting a mistake. Kale guided the ship forward, not into the rift, but along the corridor the beacon had carved through it. The flagship moved slowly, carefully, like a Coast Guard boat easing through fog toward someone clinging to a bell buoy. Inside the ancient chamber, Ryan Walker watched the ceiling pull itself apart into warm light. He had no strength left for wonder. His legs shook when he stood. His suit was scratched, his face pale behind the visor, his lips cracked from recycled air and rationed water. Still, when Sorelia's voice came through his receiver, he straightened like a man answering a phone call from home. Ryan, we have your position. He exhaled once, almost laughing. About time. I was running out of hallway. The rescue corridor reached him in a soft wave, wrapping the old chamber in gold. There was no explosion, no grand thunder, no heroic music. Just a tired man stepping forward because someone finally chose not to leave him behind. When he appeared on the bridge transport platform, the entire crew went silent. Ryan looked smaller than Sorelia remembered, thinner, worn down to the bone, but his eyes were clear. The kitchen worker who had left coffee beside the receiver covered her mouth. Kale lowered his head. Even Malrek said nothing for 3 full seconds. Ryan removed his helmet with shaking hands and took one breath of ship air like it was the best thing Earth had ever invented. Sorelia stepped toward him. Mr. Walker, she said, her voice tight. I owe you an apology. Ryan looked around the bridge, saw the sealed doors, the frightened council observer, the amber map of ancient rescue beacons waking across the galaxy. Looks like you already paid part of it. Malrek found his voice again. Human, You have activated restricted technology beyond your species' authority. You will explain why the beacon responded to you. Ryan turned slowly. He looked tired enough to fall over, but when he spoke, the whole bridge listened. Because whoever built it understood something your council forgot. Malrek's eyes narrowed. And what is that? Ryan glanced at Soralia, then at the star map, where thousands of quiet lights were appearing in places once marked empty. You do not build rescue beacons for people who matter. You build them for people everyone else might give up on. No one answered. The sentence settled over the bridge heavier than any command. Soralia understood then why the truth frightened the council so badly. It was not only that humans had been in the stars before. It was that their oldest machines were not monuments to conquest or pride. They were a promise scratched into the dark. If you are lost, speak, and someone will try to find you. Hours later, when Ryan finally sent a message to his sister in Portland, he did not mention ancient history, council lies, or the fact that half the galaxy had just woken up. He only said, "I am okay. I fixed the leak. I am coming home." Soralia kept that recording in the ship archive, not as evidence, but as a lesson. Empires remember victories. Councils remember laws. But humanity, at its best, remembers names. And somewhere beyond the glass, across dead zones that were no longer dead, the old beacons kept shining, not as weapons, not as warnings, but as porch lights left on for anyone still trying to make it back.